Let's start with the latest on the oil horrors and BP's so far failed efforts to contain it. Senator Bill Nelson is a Democrat from Florida, and Bernard Charbonnet is the former New Orleans Port Authority chair. Gentlemen, thank you. Let's start with Senator Nelson. We've got the frightening news now that the oil spill is within several miles of the Florida Panhandle. What should be done to stop the damage, sir?
The well's going to continue to gush. You got the news also, Chris, I guess, that the diamond-tipped saw is not working. It's stuck. So if this gushes on for another several months, we're going to fill up the Gulf with oil 10 times the Exxon Valdez. And that means it's going to continue to get all over the Gulf Coast, and it'll get in the loop current and go to the east coast of Florida. So what we need is a massive effort that is skimming that oil off, trying to keep it away from the coast, away from the beach, away from the wetlands, that we've seen it do so much damage to the wetlands already in Louisiana.
What isn't the Coast Guard doing, Admiral Allen, that he should be doing?
They just don't have enough out there. And at the end of the day, you ought to be getting the U.S. military, who's got the assets, who's got the command and control structure to coordinate all kinds of people, both government and private. I mean, this is an all-hands-on-deck kind of operation with all of this oil continuing to gush for several months.
Does Mullen, Admiral Mullen, the head of the Joint Chiefs, does he have any idea what he should be doing? Have you told him what you think he should be doing that he's not doing? He apparently said he's doing what he's been told to do. What do you think he should be doing?
Well, what he said, if you listen to what he said yesterday on the talk shows, he said that they don't have the technical capability that BP does with regard to trying to stop the well. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a massive effort to try to scoop that oil up, to skim it up, to burn it up, so that it doesn't ever get to the coast. And, of course, some of it's going to get to the coast. Does the Navy have the assets? Does the Navy have the assets to do that, sir? Well, it certainly has the command and control capability of organizing those assets, private assets as well.
Have you asked the Navy if it has enough boom equipment to do it? Do they have it, as you know? Do they have the inventory of equipment they need to conduct this effort to prevent Florida from being hurt any worse than it will probably be hurt by this?
The Navy doesn't, but they certainly have the capability of organizing it.
Okay, so we're at ground zero after 5-6 weeks of this? In other words, nothing's been done to protect Florida, you're telling us, at this point.
Well, we've had 5 or 6 weeks of grace period because the wind's been blowing toward the west and has kept it away from Florida, but now the wind's shifted and it's coming to Pensacola Beach.
Have we used that grace period to prepare Florida?
The Coast Guard has a command center set up in Mobile. They're ready. They have another command center down in Miami, as well as St. Petersburg and Key West. But, Chris, the amount of oil that's out there in the Gulf, I mean, we got to get everybody that we can possibly lay our hands on.
Do you think the country is recognizing the economic damage that can be done to a state like Florida on your Gulf Coast, where you have already a serious real estate depression, where there's real problems and wealth decline in that state, and this is going to damage it more, drive prices down even lower, and really drive down the value of Florida? Does the president know this? Have you talked to him about what's at stake here and why extreme measures ought to be taken to keep that oil from hitting the beach there?
The short answer to do people realize this, the short answer is no. The longer answer is that we have watched this come in on the wetlands of Louisiana, but people don't realize that Florida has far more beaches than any other state. And combine that with all of our wetlands, where all the little critters go in and are necessary for the marine life in the entire Gulf, then you've got a major disaster. When you combine that with the fact that that loop current eventually is going to catch this oil and it's going to take it around the Keys, and then it's the Gulf Stream, and then it's right up the east coast of Florida and up the east coast of the United States. you can see the kind of disaster that's coming.
Well, let's go to the man who's been hit already, Bernard Charbonnet. Sir, we've had you on before. This is something that we're looking at as a strong, well, it's going to happen to Florida. This disaster is heading its way based upon the wind currents, etc. What do you make of what's been done so far? Is the president, is this Joint Chiefs of Staff, the military, is the Admiral Allen leading up the Coast Guard at point position on this? Are they doing the job or not?
Chris, we are in a calamity on all sides. We are at war with this oil spill, and whatever the president has to bring to bear, he's got to bring to bear. He's been here. His United States attorney was here yesterday. Now, that is major. The United States attorney came to Louisiana to say he's opening criminal investigations. That is significant. The United States attorney doesn't leave Washington at a whim. So I think in that respect, he's all in this thing. But we have to realize that this is a national emergency. And I'm very sympathetic to Florida. But we are in the muck and mire as I sit here. And we are losing jobs drastically. 31% of the Gulf Coast is shut down to fishermen. That's 31% of the guys that go out there every day. We have a 6-month moratorium on deep water drilling. That's 7,000 guys who roustabouts who work on these rigs every day. We are being hit drastically as I sit here.
Let me just ask you this. What do you think of BP? BP apparently has signed permits when it began this drilling, saying that they could handle a spill 10 times this big. And they're proven for now, going on 7 weeks now, I should say 6 weeks going on 7, that they don't have the capability. They keep experimenting. They keep throwing things against the wall to see what will work. We're all in this country going to be experts on failed efforts. We're all going to know about cut and cap and about junk shot and all this other stuff. We're going to learn each one of these. It's a national education in what won't work. That's what's going on now. So BP did not have a plan to deal with a spill. They had a plan to give us one exhibit of failure after another, and that's what they've done. This country, it's like watching a terrible sports event, one after another of a disastrous attempt by this feeble-minded company to deal with a disaster it created.
But more importantly, Chris, each disaster is hitting Louisiana. We've had Katrina, we've had Rita, we've had Gustav, and now we've got BP up our backs. And no one's here stopping this thing. So think about how we feel about BP. And believe me, I was in Grand Isle Friday. The people in Grand Isle know who the culprit is. They are oil people. They work in the river. They work on the Gulf. They know it's BP. They're not blaming the president as much as the president is. He has to assume every calamity because he's the president. But at the end of the day, the people in Louisiana know oil, they know fishing, they know the Gulf, and they know it's BP.
Let me go back to Senator Nelson about the worst-case scenario. We're hearing about a worst-case scenario. You've heard it, Senator. Of course, you're most concerned about this as a senior senator. What do you make about this worst-case scenario? This is going to go on till Christmas. Dumping oil at the speed it's dumping it now, at the incredible volume of hell going on in the Gulf of Mexico, will just get worse and worse, double or triple what's already happened before this is over, and before that well empties out, I suppose, is what happens here. Your thoughts?
It took a year to get the well down in the Bay of Campeche off of Mexico back in 1979 stopped, and it was only in a few hundred feet of water. Yeah. Let's hope that they hit the mark and are able to stop this and fill up with cement the final 2,000 feet of this well down just above the oil reservoir, which would be 11,000 feet below the seabed. If that'll work, then you can stop it. But by that time, on what is now already been said is gushing out, you will have had 10 times the Exxon Valdez amount of oil in the Gulf of Mexico. Mr. Chardonnay from New Orleans, and we are in this thing together. And it's just sadly hit him first. But it's drifting the other way now, and you can imagine with that much oil out there. So this is a time that really we're going to have a coordinated effort. The Secretary of Commerce right now is considering an emergency declaration with regard to assisting the fishermen. Look how much of the Gulf is off limits to fishing now. And
well, Senator, I hear that the plan now, if you want to call it that, is there's nothing to stop this oil gush from reaching Florida at this point. Nothing stands between the oil and Florida beaches. And the plan is for the oil to hit the beaches, and after it's hit the beaches, to begin sort of this pathetic, spoonful by spoonful cleanup effort on the beaches. Is that your understanding of what's going to happen in the next couple months?
That's part of the plan, but what I'm saying should be done, that it should never get to the shore in the first place. They ought to be going out there with all the skimmers, the scoopers.
Okay, well, good luck.
Thanks.
It doesn't look like they're going to do it. Thank you very much, Senator Ben Nelson, Bernard Charbonnet. Thank you, gentlemen.
We're going to fill up the Gulf with oil 10 times the Exxon Valdez. And that means it's going to continue to get all over the Gulf Coast, and it'll get in the loop current and go to the east coast of Florida. So what we need is a massive effort that is skimming that.
What should be done to stop the damage, sir?
The well's going to continue to gush. You got the news also, Chris, I guess, that the diamond-tipped saw is not working. It's stuck. So if this gushes on for another several months.
Let's start with the latest on the oil horrors and BP's so far failed efforts to contain it. Senator Bill Nelson's a Democrat from Florida, and Bernard Charbonnet is the former New Orleans Port Authority chair. Gentlemen, thank you. Let's start with Senator Nelson. We've got the frightening news now that the oil spill is within several miles of the Florida Panhandle. What can
that oil off, trying to keep it away from the coast, away from the beach, away from the wetlands, that we've seen it do so much damage to the wetlands already in Louisiana.
What isn't the Coast Guard doing, Admiral Allen, that he should be doing?
They just don't have enough out there. And at the end of the day, you ought to be getting the U.S. military, who's got the assets, who's got the command and control structure to coordinate all kinds of people, both government and private. I mean, this is an all-hands-on-deck kind of operation with all of this oil continuing to gush for several months.